Hey, welcome back to the JRL Golf Academy. In this episode, we interview Nick Clearwater, VP of Instruction for Golf Tech, also ranked #1 teacher in Colorado, as well as best young teacher in America by Golf Digest. So in this episode, we go over a lot of things, especially topics of how to draw the golf ball consistently and building a system, as well as a lot of the science that goes behind Golf Tech. So I hope you enjoy this episode on JRL Golf Academy.
Ooh.
Absolutely, but I'm stoked to get to talk to Colorado's #1 ranked instructor, the best young teacher in America by Golf Digest, and VP of Golf Instruction at Golf Tech, none other than our man right here, Mr. Nick Clearwater.
Oh, that sounds silly, doesn't it? And you got Harvey here. Harvey doesn't really leave my side, so he's part of this whether you like it or not.
What's Harvey's handicap?
Harvey's pretty good with a golf ball. You just wait. If we hit some putts or something, you'll see what he's got it all about. Who's been the most fun for you to talk to so far?
That's a good question. It was
knowing that all of them are listening and going to be insulted by this.
Every one of them has their special uniquenesses, just like our children, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
But no,
you get it.
I think it's. Oh, I had Greg McCatton on here too.
Okay.
I had to ask him to join Instagram. Charlie Hoffman was on yesterday. Hoffman was really fun yesterday.
Okay, all right.
He was in good form yesterday.
Are you saving these afterwards, or where are you putting them?
Yeah, they go to YouTube. So they're
okay,
at
right.
JRL Golf Academy, and
there's your plug.
Yeah,
there's your plug, and now I know how to watch Charlie's.
Yeah, exactly. Charlie was he let some things out yesterday, so it was cool.
Did he?
Yeah.
All right. What was his best tidbit?
Well, he's a huge Peloton guy now, and he's just taking out all his competition frustrations on Peloton.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is he good? Is he fast?
Yeah.
No, he doesn't look real fast.
No, like the dude's like he's a horse, man, on that Peloton.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going
Oh,
against.
that's awesome.
I was name dropping for him, but he's been going against Justin Thomas and who was it? He was going up against Rory. He said was just
Rory. Okay.
Yeah, he just said Rory's a beast.
I was gonna say I heard no one can hang with Rory. Faxon was telling me Rory's like the fastest guy he's ever seen on one of those.
Well, kind of.
I don't know. I've been thinking about getting one, but I don't know. That seems like a lot of work too.
Yeah, right. I don't want people to see how bad I am out of shape.
Go into that with a pseudonym.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, how come that Leary got finished last? Well, why did he tap out before the end of the race?
Right. Oh no, that's cool. All right, I'll have to listen to Charlie. Sounds like he's always a good time. Who else do you have? Who else do you have coming up that's going to be fun?
Scott Hamilton tomorrow is going to be awesome.
Okay.
I want people to see the greatness of Scott Hamilton.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard? You've heard Tim talk, right?
Oh, sure. You can tell he's such a nice guy, totally genuine, as mellow, and I don't know. I think I remember seeing him once at a PGA Tour event, like before anyone knew who Scott Hamilton was, and I vaguely remember him just walking over and asking me a question about one of his players, and not for any. It's just what he does. He's only interested in trying to tell everyone the right thing, and I don't even I vaguely remember that, but not. He's just so humble, and he just doesn't care. His ego is so tiny, and it's always fun to meet people like that in golf because there aren't enough people like that. So he's great. He may not remember any of that or know who I am hardly at all, but no, I think Scott is an awesome guy, so that'll be cool. And then you get the southern twang in there too, and you'll have some fun with that.
Oh no, he's I've known Scotty now for maybe a couple of years, and he's always nice to me. And he reached out. He's like, "Man, I want to be on the Johnny Show." And his twang. I was like, "Dude, I need you on my show badly." If you guys tune in tomorrow, we might not even talk golf instruction with him, but I promise you, it'll be one of the most entertaining things you're gonna watch. Just listening to him talk. He can talk about grass growing, and you'll be intrigued by him. I promise you.
I think it's cool. That'll be great. Well, we're doing pretty good. We're like 5 minutes in, haven't said a word about golf. Let's just
Yeah.
keep doing that.
It's the
What
magic.
else have you been up to? What else have you been up to? I mean, I talk to you like once every 3 years, probably.
Yeah, that's about it. I've just been well, obviously with this thing, I've just been now doing FaceTime lessons and doing live with Leary, which I really like doing, and getting on people like you that I like. I like to be able to have, like, you know, things in my world, like you're in my world, because, you know, there's golf tech and then everything that you do as a teacher. I've been following you forever. But now, you know, being able to get stories, like the things that I find interesting, and getting people like you out there, you know, especially, and like Michael Manavian. Like, I had Mikey on the other day. Mikey, we're going to redo Mikey's, the internet killed, it died. We're going to redo everybody that I've had, like, off, we're redoing. But you know what I mean? You know, like the little things that you and I know, like, oh yeah, that guy's a really good teacher, but maybe they don't, you know, get the recognition and stuff.
Yeah. Or it's hard for a lot of people to have a platform to talk about golf.
Yes.
So like stuff I do for Golf Tech or Golf Channel or whatever, I still can't always really say what I want to. There's always some censorship going on. So it's there's so many people who, when you can sit in an interview like this and hang out with just a friend, it's not you don't have to quite be as timid, or you can say a touch more that's on your mind.
And that exactly.
You can have your dog in an interview.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
I can't bring my dog to the Golf Channel.
Hey,
I don't think they'd like that much.
And we could put our hat on backwards, right?
Yep. I've got the sun. I'm trying to get it where you can see me okay, but the sun is bright right now. So if I'm squinting, that's it.
Don't worry, folks. I'm naturally this dark.
And I did a couple interviews last week with, one was with Brad Faxon. I had the dog on there. He fell asleep at the table and started snoring. So if you hear that, he's pretty tired right now. Long walk.
I love that.
Long walk.
Oh my
sleepy.
God. That's a good looking pooch there, man.
So what else you been doing? You're giving FaceTime lessons, which is great. How many of those are you doing, like, a week?
Right now it's probably anywhere from, like, let's call, like, 10 to 20 a week. And then I'm trying to spend a lot of time on doing this, really. Instagram Live, because it's been a cool platform, and I don't know, whatever it's doing, it's doing.
Well, Instagram loves live video, and then they're going to love you for having a bunch of people just continuously grow your platform. So
exactly,
it's awesome for you. There you go. Go to sleep.
I keep it ghetto golf. You know what I mean? We do it in the backyard. Like, I've got world-class instructors, right? And I'm, like, in my T-shirt and orchard, you know.
I got one on too. It's just a little colder. I was just going to wear a T-shirt in my backyard here.
Yeah, dude. It's kind of like
it's fun to do it that way.
Yeah, and what it really is what? It's just like if you and I were hanging out, and, like, we had, like, our viewers here, students, hey, dude, go try this, or, you know what I mean? It's just kind of just hanging out and real relaxed. So that's kind of what it's all about. No,
that's great, man. That's great. So you got FaceTime interviews. You had Manavian on the other day.
Yep.
And then you got good. Okay.
Gina.
Gina. Okay. I don't think I remember you. I don't know if you answered my question of who's been the best so far, or who's been the most interesting to you.
Who's been the most interesting to me? I'd say all of them. Number one, you already know that,
right?
But you know, Charlie's yesterday was really good, I thought, and
that's
right. God, all of us, everybody, it's weird, Nick, because every one of them I really gone into, you know, so it's kind of hard to pick out, but I thought it was just cool, maybe in today's world, to be able to do a live lesson with Andreas Calli all the way in Denmark.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Did you get to talk about you get to talk about some of his juniors?
Oh, yeah, we did. Oh, yeah. And it was interesting, and it kind of leads into you, and I wanted to ask this about you. You know, he was talking about for 6 months out of the year, they're indoors, right? He's like, they got crap weather.
Right.
So you watch him and all the players he works with, and you look at his, like, Instagram live, or his Instagram page, and he's got every single, like, swing is just unbelievable, right?
It's really nice,
right, and like,
he's a stud. He knows what to do.
He knows the pieces, right? So, but what he was saying, what was interesting was, he said, you know, John, 6 months out of the year, we don't really get outside because of weather, so all we work on is, like, you know, changing the picture, and you know, they have TrackMan and all that stuff as well, but you know, they get more time to work on the pieces instead of, like, being totally infatuated with the ball flight for 6 months. He's like, yeah, we had a
Right.
TrackMan, but we changed pictures.
Yep.
Golf tech is in the same sort of realm, right? In terms of you guys are taught indoors.
Yeah.
What do you see from your point of view with golf tech of teaching indoors versus outdoors, and how do you see that affects players and like being able to make effective changes?
Sure. So first, well, we're known for probably teaching indoors. There really isn't all that we do. Every coach is outdoors for at least one day, sometimes 2 days, sometimes 5 days a week,
Okay.
teaching golf. So there is that blend because you can't just do it indoors. But that said, indoors is the perfect environment to do what you described with Andres. And I don't know a top 50 or 100 teacher that doesn't want an indoor place because you can control the environment much more. Like what Andres was telling, he's describing how he might want someone at 2, 3, or 4 to have their right elbow turned inward, their shoulder externally rotated, whatever he wants them to do in practice that day. And they don't even need to mess around with TrackMan. He's got enough buy-in too that he's a great teacher, so they don't question necessarily what he's doing.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect way to do that. Like the few times I've had to teach outdoors, like for a clinic or something, one in Spain a few years ago, to change the TrackMan numbers that day for a few people who were really just not very good at golf.
Yeah.
Swinging down 7, across 7,
Yeah.
slicing every ball. To do that quickly, I did some things that would compromise like the long-term ability to learn. So you might have less tilt to the left at the top of the swing. It might be way more closed with the shoulders and pelvis than you would if you were practicing over time, but that just changes the swing direction. Like, here's an example. I know, Harvey, you want to take a nap.
Yeah,
he wants to take a nap.
We all love these examples when you get up and show things, man. And we know you're going to come in left-handed.
Yep, that's right. So I was just thinking about it, like, so that day in Spain, just as an example, all the teachers are there, and it's a day about launch monitors. So a student comes in, he's a junior who's likes to play golf, but he's not very good at it. Swinging down and across, out to in, 7 degrees, basically with the path and the angle of attack. So to have him close his shoulders more, close his pelvis more to the target, turn his grip more away from the target, and then on the backswing, have his head actually rise up a little bit, which I wouldn't really tell anyone to do, as a way to compromise the inwardness of his hand path, to make sure that he just had it in enough so that at 5 on the way down, he had the shaft at least in the middle of his bicep or more in than that.
Yeah.
And then coming through the ball, didn't really care what he did as long as he did the, we'll do it this way so you can see it right hand, as long as he did the extension through the ball and tilted to the right or towards the ground. So while that was really good for him to learn how to hit a driver and not slice that way, it isn't necessarily how I would have taught him. I would have taught him how to keep his inclination to the ground but still move his hands in, so he still had the tilt in there. But that could still make it just a little longer path of trying not, hey, don't eat the tripod. Thanks. So on the downswing, he might still have his arm too far out on the way down, top of the shoulder, maybe even still through his neck if he did it that way.
Yeah.
So we might have been like 20 minutes in before every shot started to draw. That formula of just close your shoulders a ton, move your lead hand further on top of the club, and then make sure that your hand path's inward enough with just an obstacle by the golf ball is enough to help somebody learn to draw like in one shot, and then do it over and over and over, as long as they don't hit anything off the heel.
Yeah.
So when you're outdoors, you maybe have a tendency more to do things like that, not necessarily teach in the same order. But when you're indoors and you can do whatever you want all the time, whatever you want all the time, then you can really go slower on some parts, or maybe get the backswing form to look like a PGA Tour player, like all of Andre's students look like.
Yeah.
Then start worrying about their left arm at 5 or their lead arm at 5, and if their wrist is flexed or extended, or how much pronation's in there. Those smaller pieces later.
So it sounds like to me that it's not a, hey man, let's just try this.
Oh, it's never. I hope you're not talking to too many people who are saying that.
So
No, golf has enough of that already. That's what I try to spend my whole day not doing, and then teaching new coaches how to have a system that actually works very quickly without a lot of thought or training, so that I don't have nightmares about what the 750 golf tech coaches are teaching every day.
so I
No, we
think
see
that's a
that all
big,
the time.
yeah,
Like new coaches come
that's
to
a
us.
big thing that I've seen, Nick, with all the guests I've had on here. You know, it definitely a consensus. The best players or the best teachers, they all have a system.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
you know, it's not
Yeah.
a, hey, just try this. And I think sometimes maybe students think, you know, I know when they come onto my lesson tee sometimes, and exactly like I'm known kind of for getting somebody to get the ball to draw, that slice the ball. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Yep.
And something, you know, there's parts of the system that if you do this, this will happen. If you're
Yeah.
on there with a teacher that's just kind of looking at it and just kind of going, yeah, you know, maybe let's try this today or this and that. Yeah, that's not a system. Nick, along with golf tech, these are all built-in systems. If you do this, this will happen. So
Yeah. And everyone has a system, really. They just don't always know it. I think
yeah,
the
they can't define
language, yeah, for sure.
it. Yeah.
Or it's so it doesn't have enough detail. It's just so lightly detailed that they can only help a few people that might walk in the door every day,
Yeah.
or onto the lesson tee. But everybody's got one. I don't know. Did you go to Nick Shertock and Chris Como's open forum this year? Did you go down
No,
to the PGA show?
I
Okay.
caught the
So
last one with our guy Andy.
okay. Oh, that's great. Yeah. And then that was one of the topics I tried to make a point of in that forum, really, was everybody has a systems, because about 400 golf instructors were sitting in a room. And I asked for just a quick raise your hand poll of how many of you teach with a system. And about half the room raised their hand. I asked the follow-up question, how many do not? About half the room raised their hand, minus a few people who were just too taken back or nervous to even raise their hand. But that's like the most basic question about golf. If we can't all agree that we have a system, then we almost can't begin even talking about it,
Right.
because everyone believes that Butch Harmon doesn't have a system, for example, and he does.
He does.
It might be a little bit lacking in detail, and he may not even realize that he's got one from the sounds of it in interviews. But he's teaching everyone, keep your trail knee somewhat bent, move your hand path pretty straight back, keep your lead wrist extended. And I've yet to meet someone who's taken a lesson from that he didn't say that to.
Yeah.
But that's a system.
That's a system.
It's narrow,
Yeah.
and it's not extremely helpful to very many players. But there is one in there, and I don't even mean to beat on him. He's just a popular guy that says all the time, I don't have a system. I teach the person in front of me.
Right.
Well, everyone does that. Everyone has someone standing in front of them and teaches them how to play. It's just how detailed your thought process is, and where do you start, and what do you do when you how's your decision tree start looking when people hit shots that go awkwardly or away from their target. A tour player stands in front of you and says, I need some help with this. Where do you start? I mean, there's always a place to start.
Yeah. Hey, Nick, let's do this. This is, you know, when I do these shows, they're off the cuff. There's nothing scripted here. I think this would be fun for a lot of the teachers, because there's a lot of teachers in here. Would you do let's do a little piece here where you just kind of, I'll be the demonstrator, but you talk through about how, let's start from setup. And if I wanted, a lot of people here when they're teaching, they got to have a system, I feel, to get everybody to draw the ball. Let's start there, because I just feel like if you can draw the ball, you can hit it a little bit farther, a little bit higher than if you're coming in there and, you know, kind of hitting these low quack slices and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you just talk.
Go for it.
Okay, cool.
Go for it. Yeah. We've pulled about 100,000 golf tech students, I think it's like 90,000, and asked them, where do you hit your shots? 96% of them say that they slice, or they slice but don't necessarily have a pattern either. And 94% of people then answered with, what would you like to do? And they say, hit it straight or draw. And the other 6% just don't understand that that's what they want to do too. So it's the most common problem, is just slicing or swinging down too many degrees in general, although that can be chaotic with bad golfers, and then out to in, just to make it easy for, I know you're left-handed.
No, I
exactly.
switched it around, so I'm back to
okay.
here. Just
Okay, awesome.
for contact purposes.
Yeah, where do you want to start with? What most people do wrong, or what
Well,
you're going to demonstrate wrong?
No, let's do this. Let's say not a complete beginner golfer, but I come in and let's just say I am a beginner golfer, and you're going to go, okay, I'm the most amazing beginner golfer you've ever seen, number one. But number two,
obviously, I mean, look at you.
What would how would you get me to set up first? What are some of the key points that I want to do to set up to make sure that, okay, I want to draw the ball?
Yeah. Well, first, if you came in as a beginner and you were awesome anyway, I might tell you just a little bit or one or two things like the most invasive. But if you want to go through a long checklist, we can do that. Yeah, so you want to go ahead and set up to me right now this way.
Face on?
Yeah. So I'd put the butt end of the club in the middle of your left thigh from this view. So that far up. Yep. Okay. Pretty good. And then I would use, you familiar with your anatomical snuff box and the heel pad?
Right here?
Of your lead hand, yep.
Yep, right there.
So I put the heel pad, the center of that, right on top of the shaft. And then I'd make sure that your snuff box was right on the top of the shaft or slightly on the right side of it, or trail side, yep. Okay. And then your right index finger, pressure point number 3, a lot of people know that as. I'd put that into the side of the shaft, or if you wanted to make sure you draw, you could twist that underneath the shaft enough to where it was actually under it.
A little more like
and
this.
Then you'd have, then you'd have an attachment there that's that's really closing the face to the swing direction just at address that way.
Okay.
Okay, that's really good. And one way you can always remember that too, most often I might draw a dot on someone's snuff box. So that's just the joint where you've got the dimple in your wrist between your hand and your forearm here. Draw a dot there, draw a dot on your heel pad, and draw a dot on pressure point number 3, and place each one of those right where I just described it, and you have a pretty good attachment right to the golf club.
Number, sorry. Yeah. And
you
then
got
there's the
it.
snuff
Close
box.
enough.
And
perfect.
Heel pad.
You're an excellent demonstrator. So if you did that, at least you'd be set up to the ball at this point in time with the face closed to the path, if that makes sense. And if you keep thinking about every single frame of the camera that you could look at, or every single second of your swing, is the face open to the path, closed to the path? Is your swing direction right or left? Is your angle of attack down or up? You can do that with every single picture. That doesn't mean that on the downswing, if at P6 you have the shaft in, that you're not going to slice still. But at that point in time, you're ready to draw.
Yeah, I've got a face that I know is closed to my path, right?
Mm-hmm. So, yep, you're all set up. So most people just start and they have the face too open to the path at address. So their lead hand is turned too far to the left for you right now, too far toward the target. Their right hand's too far on top of the club, and they're ready to hit like a bunker shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where most people start to go wrong, at least in the beginning. Now, there's nothing that says you can't grip the club that way and still draw. You just have to do other things.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got my setup. So I've got my snuff.
You got your, you got the butt end of the club on your lead thigh, the middle of your lead thigh. You've got your hands turned far enough away from the target where you're not ready to slice yet. And then go ahead and set up again just down the line. So your PGA Tour average, at least out of the couple hundred players that we've measured, have their hips basically 0 degrees open to the target at address. So that's just perfectly parallel to that rod you have on the ground by your feet. So if I wanted to make sure you drew, so there's open, good demo, and then closed, So if you wanted to make sure that you did draw it, I'd start at address with your hips closed or aim to the right, the way we're watching it right now. Okay. The same thing with your shoulders. And then, exactly. Aim those as far to the right as you really want. I wouldn't change your stance line, though. I think that's maybe some of the people you've interviewed so far aren't afraid to aim your stance to the right. I actually do not do that ever. Okay. So that might be some variance, at least in some of your guests. Okay. I'm always teaching people to basically aim their feet at the target, not parallel to the left. It's just aim your feet at the target. Okay. The shoulder turn and the hip turn being closed, that's the biggest part for amateurs too, pushing the butt under the club towards the target enough. And then, John, you know this, you go into a greenside bunker, and where do you try to put the butt under the club relative to the ground? Like how high off the ground?
On a greenside bunker?
Yep.
I'd be like this.
So you really lower it because that does help you move your swing direction out to in. So if you want to make sure you draw these things too, another additional point is just raise the butt end of the club up. Yep. And then even from, go ahead and do that one more time. So right from where we're sitting, John, when we look at your picture from that side view that you're at right now, there's even like a tiny little space between your forearms. And my buddy Grant Waite calls that the window of opportunity. And most people slam that thing closed on the downswing, but starting out at 1 with that window of opportunity in there is a really good place to start too. So you've got about all of that, and then if you tilt your neck slightly to the left and turn your neck slightly to the right, you've set up your swing direction more to the right as well. Yeah. So just watching me from here, you tilt your neck to the left like Jack Nicklaus is really known for, and then start turning it slightly to the right, and then you've set up your swing direction to move it more inward on the backswing.
Okay, I got that. I can see my eye line. I can see now it's like parallel to this yellow stick here, out to the right.
So try to make it where if you had laser beams coming out of your eyes, you'd be looking almost even with the golf ball, but then just by tilting your neck to the left and turning your head to the right, you're actually swiveling that eye line and laser more towards you and more away from the target.
Got it. So
looks pretty good. Be hard to screw that up. Not that you couldn't. I watch people do it all the time, but that would be a good start.
So then, what's the tour average, would you say, within the numbers of golf tech that you guys have studied? What are they left to right in terms of percentages?
For weight? Is that what you're describing?
Yeah.
Okay. That we don't really measure that yet.
Pressure.
We don't measure pressure yet or weight. Pressure isn't really all that interesting to me, but I might start with probably my weight pretty evenly distributed, maybe slightly more towards your lead foot, but not much, just a little bit.
Okay.
And I think that might be something that I've probably done different maybe in the last 10 years. I would have started with more weight on your lead leg, but I'm usually starting with less and less than I used to anyway. Not for any reason, really. Just I find I don't need to start with someone 70, 80, 90% on their left foot very often.
Not so much like this, just to start them out.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes I'll start people like that if they don't understand how the hip slide works on the downswing or the hip sway towards the target. Yeah. That's actually, sometimes I've done a few drills you can find on YouTube starting with all of my weight on my left foot, not really moving back. All I'm really doing there is demonstrating to someone else who I was giving a golf lesson to in person. Here's where you want to put your left knee. So you could demonstrate that right there. So put your left knee just slightly in front of your ankle. Now make a backswing and try not to move it very much away from the target. And then on the way down, try to put your left knee right where you had it at address again. And that's how you could learn the pelvic sway that way. Where to position your left knee, I think, is a big part of what people don't really understand. Yeah, I like it an inch or two in front of your ankle. And then from there, it's just going to move further away because you're straightening your left leg. So it gets more over your ankle through the ball. Yep. So and you do that really well. I can tell you've been practicing.
In the net. I haven't missed the net yet, so I'm pretty good. Every week, I haven't missed the net. I'm doing good. So you were talking about that's an interesting point there that I think a lot of people, maybe we could talk about that, about the knees. And, especially people that are trying to draw the ball. Like I said, I'm addressing people that want to draw the ball right now, okay?
Yeah.
So you were saying, the left knee is going to be like forward to the ankle, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I see with the slicers, if anything, their left knee's behind that and their right knee's more flexed. And they start looking.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? They start looking like this.
Yeah. So you've got your pelvic sway there. So you've got, so what we use currently is a sensor that sits on your tailbone, and we can measure where that is when it starts and then where it is when you hit a ball. And the best players move that about 1.5 inches to 2 inches more toward the target than where it started. So to be able to, yes. So address is basically 0, and then when you hit, you want it about 1.5 to 2 inches more toward the target, which is tricky because you've got your hips are more turned at impact than they are at address, which moves your tailbone a little further away from the target. So you've got a lot of translation of your pelvis you need to do from address until impact to make up for that. Some people, it's as much as 4 or 5 inches.
So that center what you're telling me is as I keep turning, I've got to keep pushing it forward as I'm turning.
Yeah, it would be very hard. You're doing a really nice demo of the follow through. It'd be really hard to get to where the shaft is parallel to the ground in the follow through, and have your tailbone toward the target without a lot of hip sway towards the target. But I do watch on this channel right here, this Instagram page, not yours, but all over. I see a lot of teachers actually teaching almost the antithesis of that. And I'm still not quite wrapping my head around the value in that piece. But most people need to learn, start with your weight pretty even, but when you hit the ball, you need to massively translate your hips towards the target. 4, 5, 6 inches is not unreasonable.
Yeah, I think even, oh God, what was it? I was talking with Andy, and it might have been on, what was the other measuring system? AMA? Or
AMM is what I
AMM.
use. I just use a 2-sensor system. All the work you've seen with Andy is with an 8 or 10 sensor system. So yeah, we're using the same thing. I'm just not measuring like the center of you. So between your pelvis, front and back, and on the sides. I'm just measuring where that one sensor is for now. I've done that many times, measuring the virtual center, a digitized point in the pelvis. But I actually really like the sensor on the tailbone. It's easy to teach a person how to play golf with that.
Well, I think what I'd even seen was like it might be up even on the average the amount of the pelvic sway was like all the way up to like 9 inches. I mean,
from on gears, which I've had for I think 7 years now, from P5, which is the downswing when your left humerus is parallel to the ground, until your right humerus is 45 degrees above parallel to the ground. There's a 7-inch hip sway just from that amount. So the center of your pelvis moves 7 inches from there. Wow. On average, and that one is I think 50 PGA Tour players average together.
Wow!
And there's no one who moves less than 4 from 5 to 8. There's just 0 people move their pelvis less than 4 inches from P5 to P8.
That's a big move, people. That you know, I know what you mean with some of the Instagram stuff, but kind of and I'm just gonna say that you got to move that center of the pelvis quite a bit forward as you're turning, and you got to get extending as well. Nick, the only thing I can see is I guess maybe there are some people that get too soon over to the left side, maybe too fast.
Sure. So those people need a pill that's a little different. Then those are the people who on the downswing need to stay tilted to the left longer.
Yeah.
Not change where their pelvis is at by teaching them to move it away. It's to slow the rate that you'd slide towards the target, but keep your shoulders and your hips still inclined towards the ground from 4 to 5.5 or whatever you want to do.
So
I wouldn't. Yeah. So stay tilted to the left with your shoulders like you did there. Yeah. Then continue to move your pelvis towards the target at that point. Because what you really need is there's our tour average for the tilt of your shoulders at impact is 39 degrees to the right for a right-handed player. So toward the target, your shaft is aimed upward toward the target. To do that, you need to have the sway of your pelvis move towards the target, and then your thorax or the top of your cervical spine, that stays pretty much where it was at address until impact, or moves ever so slightly away. And those two things help you tilt yourself so the club doesn't smash into the ground. Your angle of attack can be near the tour average that way. Yeah. Without your pelvic sway moving towards the target from 5 to 7, you can't actually tilt your shoulders 39 to the right. So launching the ball into the air is now more complicated. So now you need to do something else.
So
and some people are finding
looks something like this. If the center of my pelvis did not go forward enough to create some sort of side bend and a tilt, and if it was actually back, I would actually have a different look, and you can now see what that would look like.
Right. So it's really challenging that's why most people who slice tend to have the least amount of hip sway towards the target.
Yeah.
It's challenging to get the shoulder tilt right, which then lowers the shaft in, and then it gives you a chance to swing to the right.
Yeah.
I don't know. So maybe there's a method to I'll call it the madness of trying to teach zero pelvic sway toward the target on the downswing, but I couldn't tell you exactly what it is because it doesn't follow any sort of pattern that I've ever measured in a PGA Tour player. And several hundred in, I've never seen that.
All right. So let's go back here now. Let's go back, and I want to be able to hit one shot on the beginner. And I've got all my setup stuff, all right? And I've got my window of opportunity set up because the butt of my club is forward, my shoulders are closed. My hips
raise the handle a little bit more. Yeah. Now in the backswing. Yeah, well, it's a nice way to learn how to draw. Doesn't mean you're going to, but it's a good start. Then in the backswing, so just go to P2, the next checkpoint, which you can kind of see from this camera view. You have there you go. I'm more of a stance line kind of guy. I'd move your hand path in enough so that by the time you got to 2.5, which is just a little bit past 2, that the hand path's actually going through the edge of your belt buckle. So your left arm has to move inward behind you, and you can sort of, I don't have a way of drawing on your screen, but at this point in time, if you had a belt on, you wouldn't really be able to see it very much because your hands are actually bisecting that right now.
I think another checkpoint that I'll use there, Nick, is when they're looking down, that the hands will go through like the laces of the right shoe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. I'm sure that's a good way to do it for sure. Anything to keep moving your hands in, but you need some barometer to let you know when you've done it too much.
Yeah.
So you're defining that well. Sorry, it's getting a little bright out here. So whatever you want for 2 and 2.5, the checkpoint for your laces or the edge of your belt buckle. And then a lot of people have the face angle too open there. So I probably spend a ton of time at 2.5 teaching them how to close the face to the path.
So that would be open.
Yeah.
That would be
a good. And maybe we'll go to 3 and then 4, and then I'll show you how I usually teach people to close the face a lot.
Okay.
So at 3, I'm aiming for the hand path at this point in time to actually go through the bottom of your left bicep. So keep moving it in. From this view, it's got to go more. Lower the butt end a little bit more, a couple inches. Yep. So that's a little too far in. Push it out away from you a touch more, right about there. So the grip end of the club is, if you could take John and see right through his hands, right through the shaft, you'd notice how that's in the middle of his right arm. So the bottom of your bicep is where I put it at 3. And then we'll talk about that on the way down, but probably about in the middle is where I would put it at 5.
Okay.
Okay. So, yep, go up to that. So at the top there, I put the butt end of the club a couple of inches outside of your trail shoulder, which you're not quite doing because I know how hard this is to demonstrate. And then the PGA Tour players on average turn 89 with their shoulders and 44 with their hips on those 2 sensors that I was describing before. And then the shoulder tilts 36 to the left, the pelvis is 12 degrees to the left, and your shoulder and thoracic bend is 0 at this point in time. So I know there's a lot of detail in there, but that's how to teach golf and then recognize differences. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bunch of teachers. There's a bunch of teachers.
Yeah. And there are probably 50 more things we could talk about, but that might be a good start.
Okay. So there's 4.
Yep.
And then okay there, Nick, right there?
Yeah, you're doing pretty good there for sure. And then on the downswing, I do P5 where you have the butt end of the club or the middle of the grip there passing through the middle of your right arm. That's a little bit low. You're almost there. This is pretty good. You're going to be able to do a clinic soon. This is hard, isn't it? Just holding a position. That's tricky.
Yeah, dude, I did this with Mac. Dude, it killed me.
But most people on the way down, when I'm saying 5, I just mean when your left arm's parallel to the ground, have the shaft passing through their neck or their right ear, which John's going to demonstrate both of those now. So push the shaft butt end of the club out more. Yep. And then from there, at that point in time, you are ready to slice across the ball as much as 10 to 20 degrees. Even PGA Tour players do that. At 5, they have the shaft out too far, and then they've just learned how to accommodate the swing direction in a very non-PGA Tour-like way to lower the shaft, but ultimately open the face of the path too often when they do it. How about the face angle on the backswing? So here's how I would do it anyway. I'll use I would use a cell phone. Actually, I think this is an easy way to visualize it anyway.
Are we going to James Hong?
I don't know what the James Hong is.
No cell
I guess we're gonna find. Do you want to find out?
Yeah,
Let's find out.
Yeah, I want to see this. Hey, whoa. I want to see this.
Okay, so I'd use your cell phone. I'd turn the camera on, and I would face the camera towards you so that it is looking at your face.
Okay.
So just what you're seeing right now. Yeah, another one. I'm using mine, so I can't use it. So you've got the camera is facing back at you.
Okay.
And you can see yourself in that. I would keep that orientation where you can see yourself. You're actually making a selfie. I don't know if this is what you're talking about with James. You're making a selfie at a dress. To do that, you really have to extend your right wrist quite a bit to be able to do that, because I would actually have them hold the phone in the front, but allow you to be able to see the camera. The camera can still see you. Your right wrist is extended as much as you can, and that your hand is actually on the phone.
Yeah.
Camera can see you. Okay. Now in the backswing, I know it's facing the other way, but on the backswing, you're going to keep the camera facing at you up until 3. At which point you're going to start to turn the camera so that now you turn into the landscape view and still view yourself all the way up to the top.
So being able to see the camera the whole time.
Well, you should be able to see your smiling face the whole time.
Okay.
But you're going to change your orientation from the way we're looking at it now to sideways, from 3 to 4.
Okay.
And that's the external rotation and the loading of number 3.
Yeah.
Can you visualize that one?
Yeah, I'm doing it.
It's hard for me to do without a phone, but I would say you stare at yourself the whole time, and then where you don't see yourself anymore is a good cue. Because if you can't see yourself at about 3.5, that means you need to continue to extend your right wrist more so that you can actually see yourself.
Yeah.
Most people start to flex their right wrist too much from 3 to 4. And then at that point, the camera is almost facing like away from behind you. So it's always see yourself. And then the trick from 3 to 4, and the part I like about that one maybe the most, is one that's pretty visual. It's hard to screw that up. You don't have to give many instructions. But the loading of 3 and externally rotating your shoulder starts to twist the camera.
Okay.
So you're learning how to do that enough. If you just made the backswing where you could always see yourself in the profile view, what you're never really learning is what you're actually teaching yourself is how to internally rotate your shoulder as you make a backswing so you can still see yourself. You got to twist that whole thing.
I gotcha.
Is that the James Hong?
James Hong, he did this deal before where, let me switch this around again. And he would.
I can only imagine what he said. Is about donuts and cookies and stuff like that.
He's speaking my language at that point, but
well, everybody loves those. I'm a sugar holic too.
So he would he would talk about. So I'm gonna switch it around so it's right. It's the correct way now. So the screen of the phone, right?
Okay.
So if you were gonna take a selfie, you look at the screen, right?
Right.
So I'll tell the students, I'm like, hey, on the backswing, or especially on the the guys that roll it wide open, when they're looking at their backswing, they're taking a selfie.
Yep.
So getting them to getting them to feel first and understanding, like, hey, I want the screen to look away from you, so that it's not you're not going into moving into that selfie mode where it starts opening the face. So having them feel like, okay, like the opposite of a selfie, keeping the screen looked away, and then as they're coming down also always feeling like the screen's looking away from you. I've had some success with that as well.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's basically what I'm describing, just the antithesis of how to use your phone. The only, I guess what I'm missing in there is how do you know if you've externally rotated your shoulder enough? Because I can aim the phone away from me and still not have my right shoulder retracting and turning enough.
Well, that's why you're the VP of Golf Tech, dude.
Oh yeah, something like that. You keep talking. I'm gonna grab my iPad because I think it's a good visual.
This is the beauty about Nick. I know he works at a major golf company, probably arguably the largest golf company instructional wise. but he can
Yeah.
get these things down to the most simple, most basic fundamental for us to be able to apply these things. So that's why I'm always excited about. Hey, can you flip it around for a second?
I don't know. Can I?
Yeah, your screen. Just click on the blame the honk. There you go. Cool. Oh, yeah, you had it the other way.
Oh, you want to go that way? Okay, so I can't see you then?
Yeah. There we go. Cool. That's right.
Blame the Hong.
Blame the Hong.
Is this what you're looking for? It's going to be
Yeah,
hard
there
to
we
see.
go,
It's so
big guy.
bright. All right, let me try to go this way.
Okay.
Much better camera. I just can't really tell what you're looking at.
No,
You see me in the frame okay?
Yep, you're perfect.
All right. So I can't do this right now because I've got an iPad here instead of my phone. But I would
Okay.
have my phone, and I'd be squeezing it like this.
Okay.
And you can see how much I have to extend my right wrist to do that.
Yeah.
Grab the whole phone, and then the whole time you're going to keep that facing you. And then at this point in time, when your left arm is parallel to the ground, instead of just facing you and vertical, more or less that way, you got to start to twist the camera itself and turn it so that it's panoramic that way. That way, and then if it starts to, I think where most people go awry is they'll get near the top and they start to turn the phone away from them, and that's generally from your right shoulder and your right elbow, not retracting enough, externally rotating, and then that's how you actually view yourself. But I think you described it well of when you flex your right wrist enough, you start to twist that where you can't see anything. I'm just looking at the back of my iPad now.
Yeah.
So you've got to really retract your shoulder, externally rotate a ton so that you can actually see yourself at this point in time while you make a backswing.
Yeah. I love that. And what are you doing on the downswing with that, Nick?
Same thing. You can't go very fast like that, but I would still try to back of the phone, keep that aimed away from you so you're still looking at yourself on the way down. You can do that at home and practice as much as you want.
Yeah.
Then at 7, the important part is to now have your landscape view, but be able to see yourself still in the camera. To do that, now you've got to have the internal rotation of your elbow, turning, twisting it as much as you can, externally rotating your shoulder to still be able to see yourself.
Yep.
Most people are out there hitting and their right shoulder's internally rotating too much and their right wrist is just flopping around. Like how you'd see the windshield wiper. Yeah, windshield wiper on your car. It's got to feel less like you're just tossing the ball to the left and more that you're delaying that right wrist extension from moving towards flexion too soon. Not that it shouldn't, it definitely should, but most people do that poorly already.
They do that prematurely already.
Yeah, everybody's right wrist is moving from extension, or it's moving from that cupped extension position towards being flexed. It's just when you do that.
Yeah.
The worst players don't load the radial deviation or the right wrist extension enough, which is why I like doing the phone piece, just to learn how to do both of those enough and keep your external rotation of your shoulder enough, adequate enough to not open up the face. And then on the way down, they start to move towards ulnar deviation too soon, too fast, too many degrees. And from that point in time, you're left with either the, you're going to get that thing, aren't you? You're left with either extend your left wrist, flex your left elbow, use the windshield wiper with your right elbow. That's just all you have left at that point in time.
Hey, everybody, like the pieces we went over there, especially the ones that Nick just described there, I promise you those are nuggets that are going to help you every single day in your teaching. I guarantee it. So with that being said, this will be on YouTube at JRL Golf Academy. It's going to live there. That was a massive nugget that was just shared there by Nick. So don't forget these pieces here. You can find it. Nick's going to show. What are you showing us here, Nick? What are you doing?
Oh, well, we're going to keep doing the downswing too.
Oh, yeah.
Assuming Harvey doesn't try to eat this golf ball. And the only club I have in my house is a putter. Sit down. Good boy. You've got different things you can do for the downswing here too. So let's go just a little more forward in time. Let's say on the downswing, when you get to where your left humerus is parallel to the ground,
Okay.
Shaft goes through the middle of your arm. Am I standing okay in the frame?
You're good. You're good. Right there's even
Not
better.
quite right. Okay. So when the shaft is through the middle of your right forearm, on the way back, I said do it on the bottom. That's how I would do this. And then at 5, it's a touch higher. That in time also keeps the butt end of the club close enough to the ground without being farther away from you, which is the start of how most people slice.
Yeah.
They get to the top of the swing and then push the butt end of the club out,
Yep.
which is the shallowing of the shaft, apparently. But what I've really done is not necessarily shallowed the shaft to my target. I just moved my swing direction 45 degrees to the left.
Yeah.
So while the shaft looks more shallow than it was, it's not relative to where I'm going. It's shallower relative to over there.
And the only
That's
save,
important.
the only save from there is to side bend and early extend to try to get that sweet spot back in, isn't it?
Yeah, well, a lot of players like Jimmy Walker comes to mind. He's like one of the really long hitter, but one of the most crooked for sure. So at 5 with his driver, he's got the shaft going through his neck. Always has, unfortunately. And his caddy, Andy, is a super guy, and he knows not to do that. So I think he's always helping Jimmy have it in a little more than that. But the shaft goes through his neck, and then at that point in time, his swing direction is to the left or out to in, depending on how you're going to look at me here. And then from there, the way that the good players accommodate that, instead of continuing to just shift your swing direction more out to in, like the worst players do, they start to bend themselves backwards, which sometimes is losing your inclination to the ground. So that starts changing. And then as you do that, if anything, they try not to open at all, which starts to lower the shaft. So I can move from a swing direction at 5 that's out too many degrees, start to bend backward, tilt to the right, and lower the swing direction, move it in behind me enough where now I'm actually ready to swing to the right of the target from 5 to 6. But there's a problem with that, and that usually compromises the face angle to the path. It starts opening the face to the path as you do that. So someone like Jimmy or Aaron Badley, when he's playing his worst, has his arm out too far.
Mickelson?
Lower. Oh, gosh, every swing. Yeah. He just doesn't do this part. He really doesn't do this part at all. He'd be one of my – if there's someone on the PGA Tour I'd like to teach, that'd be the guy, but that may be for another day. So the butt end of the club at 5 is out too far. Tilt yourself to the right or away from the target. Bend yourself backward, and you can swing to the right. But now the face angle is too open relative to where I want to point it when I hit this ball. So those are also the players that hit and have the shaft twisting the most through the shot.
Yep.
So you might see it, say, 7.5. The face angle looks more closed than most tour players, far more closed than, say, Jim Furyk at that point in time. That's the result of not being able to move either your left or your right shoulder fast enough to keep the shaft from overtaking your hands and closing the face a lot. So generally you're getting the players who have their arm out too far, bending, tilting back, so they translate too far away from the target and then twist the shaft a ton coming through the ball. And your predictability of how to hit is pretty compromised at that point in time. It's really hard to hit a fairway if you're going to swing fast that way.
Amen.
So then Jimmy Walker grabs a 42-inch driver and says that's going to help him. And that's now he's back to longer again, and I don't mean that as like a joke or anything, but that's what they're left with is trying to find something. It's either change your swing or just grab a shorter club that maybe just reduces your ball speed enough where you miss a few less fairways, or the problem that you made is less severe. I think that's really what guys like Jimmy are doing.
Or that's when you bring in a new golf coach, right? And it's like, all right, that's it.
Yeah, that happens. But when you have Butch Harmon as your coach, it takes a lot of people a long time to get away from that. Although, interestingly enough, if you want to have a fun experiment while everybody's sitting at home, take the list of PGA Tour players that used to work with Butch Harmon but don't anymore, and write that out. And then imagine, like, I'm not even trying to, pound on Butch here, but take that list of these are the players that left this teacher, and you might have a list that makes you think, wow, this teacher must be terrible. They had all these great players, but none of them are there anymore. But that's for another day. Jimmy Walker should hit fairways and bomb these drivers out there, but his form is what keeps him from doing it. It's not necessarily anything else.
I would agree.
But his problems are just common for most people who slice. They have the shaft out too far.
Yeah.
So I think we're getting there. Then on the way down, don't hit with your dog between your feet. You've got where I would do the shaft just slightly to the inside of your hands. And by putting something by your golf ball, like I just have this golf ball box, I'd try to use like a pool noodle the most.
Yeah.
That really helps people recognize if they have the windshield wiper problem kicking in, where their right shoulder doesn't stay externally rotated enough, don't quite have the handle forward enough or the wrist flexed enough, you'd start smashing right into that box of golf balls on the ground. So then you at least have an awareness of whether or not you're doing, or you're keeping your swing direction to the right from, say, 6.5 to 7.
So,
And then a lot of people will put down something by a golf ball there.
yeah, I'll take a basket.
And then,
I mean, I'm showing people
yeah,
right
that'll
now,
work.
You know, you could even, you know, when you get your golf balls, you know, at least a lot of places, you get them in a basket, and you just go ahead and put the basket next to the ball.
Yeah, that works fine. And then how many people do you actually put that down to and they say, wow, I didn't know that's what I was supposed to do?
Pretty much every one of them that I put it there
Yeah. And then you show that
Yeah.
to someone who overdraws and they say, yeah, no problem, which really gets you down to like, where do you start with a slicer? And it's not necessarily running you through those 50 things I told you to do at address. It's really explaining like the rules of the game.
Yes.
Thanks for watching, everybody, the JRL Golf Academy. Please make sure to link and comment down below. Make sure you subscribe and turn on that little bell for notifications. And we look forward to seeing you on the next JRL Golf Academy.